It is the Ash Wednesday, and most Christians world over begin their Lenten season. I'd need my resource person to clear us on that. The Lenten season from today. And so to have that conversation with me is a clergyman in the person of Reverend Father Ambrose Okuchukwu Ofodile. Now, I don't know if it's day verbum or verbum day. Okay, he is a priest and the director of Radio Maria Nigeria in Enugu, amongst other things. Good morning, Padre.
Good morning.
Do we say happy Ash Wednesday?
Yes, of course.
We should be happy even when we are going to be
yes.
in abstinence and fasting all
in
the
our
way.
explanation, we shall explain why we should be happy, because it is not something bad. It is something that we are joining with Christ, and it's about having hope that after suffering with Him, we will also rise with Him.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start with this Ash Wednesday.
Okay.
What's the significance of you're already wearing your ash on your forehead?
Yes.
Most of us who are Catholics, because of the classification we are in, may not attend very early in the morning, and
I have
probably
some
later.
ashes, so I will also impose ashes.
Okay,
on
that's
after
interesting. And if you're anywhere around our studios, you can come join us. We have a priest in the studio. So, what's the significance of the Ash Wednesday, the observation of Ash Wednesday?
Okay, let's start with that Ash Wednesday is the beginning of the Lenten period. Apart from Christmas, the next celebration or the next period of the church's calendar becomes the Lenten period, where we journey with Christ in His passion and His Paschal mystery, because Ash Wednesday is about 40 days and a symbol of the 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and 40 has been symbolic in the Old Testament. You talk about the 40 years of trekking or traveling by the Jews to the Promised Land. You talk about 40 days and 40 nights of Moses, who fasted, and then you talk about Elijah, who traveled to the Mount of God, 40 days and 40 nights. You talk about the Ninevites, who fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. You talk about Noah, and so many other dimensions of 40 in the Old Testament. So we are talking about a participation in the Paschal mystery of Christ, that Jesus Himself for 40 days and 40 nights was actually He fasted. And as Christians, we and imitators of Christ, we are participating in this passion of Christ, in this journey of our Savior. We are journeying with Him. That's why we are observing it. So when we talk about Ash Wednesday, the beginning of the Lenten period, and then we talk about imposition of ash, ash has a lot of biblical references, especially in the Old Testament. You talk about Jonah chapter 42. Jonah had to say, it made mention of lying in sackcloth and ashes. You talk about of course, Jonah was asked to go and preach to the Ninevites, and when he got there, especially in verse 6, the Bible recorded that the king himself removed his royal robe and sat in sackcloth and ashes. You also talk about Genesis chapter 3 verse 19, where God, after declaring the punishment for Adam and Eve, told them that they would return to dust, for unto dust they came from. And also you have Job chapter 42. Job also made mention of that. So ash is when you talk about ash, you're talking about fasting, you're talking about penitential rites. Of course, the early or history of Ash Wednesday has it that a period where people, penitents, had to wear sackcloth and ashes. And of course, if you know sackcloth, it's always discomforting to be in a sackcloth. So in the description of Ash Wednesday, we talk about Christian participation in the Paschal mystery, in the sufferings of Christ. So as Christians, we are starting this period of joining with Christ, imitating Him in His suffering. And this ash reminds us, of course, when the ash is being imposed on you, the priest will tell you, you are ash, and unto ash you shall return. Also, he may also say, repent and believe in the gospel. These are reminders to the Christians that they are ashes. That as you are living your life, you should remember that you should understand that Your life is very small here. This is not our resting place. We are only pilgrims in this world. So our actions, our attitudes should be geared towards doing the will of God and not to do our own will. So imposition of ash is a sign that we are suffering with Christ. We have repented of our sins and we have decided to follow Christ. And it's not a temporal following. You know, the mistake most people do is that during Lenten period, they just do it because, okay, this Lent, after 40 days, we'll go back to our normal attitude. No. This morning, I was talking to my students. I told them, this is a period of picking a virtue and dropping a vice. You pick a virtue and you drop a vice. And it is not just temporal, because you have to actually take it up and it will be part of you. It's not a temporal time to do good and later you do evil. So this is what we teach to our people, and it is the significance of this ash imposition. And every Christian, apart from the physical imposition, you should understand its deeper meaning, that you are nothing in this world. So you should not hold this world so much, because very soon, as you are living your life, you should understand that very soon you have to give account of this life you are living.
Okay, there's something you said, and before we continue the conversation, I need to have our viewer get it clearer. You said something about 40 days of fast and abstinence and the whole expectations as regards Lenten season. And I was going to ask you if beyond the 40 days of Lenten period, if the church has something else, to do from time to time to ensure that people are still in line, okay, with the expectations as Christians, and not just be all good Christians during the Lenten period, like you mentioned.
Yeah. To start with, the Lenten period is a period of course, you have the 3 pillars of Lent. We have almsgiving, we have fasting, and then we have almsgiving, fasting, and then prayer. These are the 3 pillars.
And these are the expectations.
Expectations.
During the Lenten period.
Every Christian. Now, when we talk about fasting, of course, not to lay aside the fact that every Friday also we have Stations of the Cross in our various parishes. But when we talk about these 3 ideas, Jesus gave us a clear understanding of what should be done and how we should go about the 3 pillars of Lent. He talked about fasting, how we should fast. Almsgiving, how we should do the almsgiving. Then prayer, how we should do this prayer. Matthew chapter 6. So in fasting, we don't talk about fasting from food alone. We also talk about fasting from bad behaviors. This morning I was talking to my son. I told them that it is even better for you to fast from bad behaviors than to fast from food. Because these days, people don't eat 3 times in a day. Things are so hard. So it's better to even fast from bad behaviors, from negative things. If you have been, involving yourself in bad attitudes, bad behaviors, you fast from them. So fasting is very important, to abstain from food from time to time. In preparing yourself like Jesus Christ for the ministry. And then you prepare for yourself, for the Easter period. The whole essence of this Lenten period is to be in the mood of Jesus Christ. We are Christians and we are living the life of Christ. So it's an opportunity for us to actually draw near to him. So we talk about fasting, we talk about almsgiving. It's not about trumpeting it. I always tell people that there is a difference between being charitable and being philanthropic. Someone who is charitable does things for the sake of God. You give. You see someone who is begging. You see areas where you should help. You do that, not trumpeting it. You're doing it for the sake of God. But a philanthropist will want everybody to know, I am doing this for people. You see them, advertising themselves because they are helping poor people and all that. It's not, even though these are good acts, but they are not charitable. So we should differentiate from. So when we talk about almsgiving, we talk about giving what we have. And it's not just about material things. It's also about making yourself available for people who need your help. You are a doctor, you are a nurse, you are a broadcaster, you are a priest. Make yourself available for the good things, to people. That's on almsgiving. Then you talk about prayer. Jesus will tell us that the Pharisees would show everybody that they are praying. Fasting. You show everybody, you shout, you howl, so that people will know you are praying. No. Jesus says, go to your room and pray, shut the door, so that your Father who sees in secret.
Now, is what you're talking about now different from the fact that I know about Catholic Church. I don't know if there's any denomination that also impose the ash on forehead on Ash Wednesdays. Is that not looking alike? You know, making everyone know that you are now in this mood.
Yeah, you know, we talk about public penitence, and we have seen instances in the Old Testament where people, like the people of Nineveh, they put on sackcloth and ashes to show that they are fasting. But this time around, on Ash Wednesday, it becomes liturgical. It becomes instituted. Okay. And the church is understanding that this is a day we are beginning Lent, and we are also using it for evangelization. It's to remind ourselves that we are dust. Of course, I've given instances in Genesis chapter 3. Talking about man, you shall return to dust. Man that was created immortal became subject to death and sin because he lost it with God. So it's an opportunity for us to remind ourselves that life is short and we must imitate Christ. In these three pillars, we see Christ. It's not a public show. It's not a public, you're trying to show everybody you are having ash. We look at the deeper meaning. Beyond the surface, what does it mean? What does the imposition of ash mean? Beyond the imposition of ash on the forehead of Christians, what does it mean? Because some of the Christian denominations are also, taking part in it. Where I'm coming from, people from other Christian denominations, I cannot deny them that, because it's a reminder. As I do that, I say, man, remember that you are dust, and unto dust you shall return. Repent and believe in the gospel. These are areas. And after today, we be in the mood of Lent. Like I said at the beginning, it's not just do it this period and then it's over. It becomes a lifestyle, part of us.
Okay, these expectations throughout this period will have to last the 40 days, and Christians are expected to be conscientious, to actually be intentional about what they're doing the entire 40 days. Abstinence, fasting, prayer, almsgiving, and all. Now, I don't know if there are other dedicated days, special days within the 40 days. For instance, there is the Ash Wednesday.
Yes.
Are there other dedicated days within
Of course, we have what we call the Triduum. Triduum becomes then, we have the Holy Week. Towards the end of the 40 days, you have the Holy Week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We call the Triduum. The three, we say the three most holy days in the Holy Week. On Holy Thursday, we talk about the mandatum. Jesus washes the feet of the disciples. He instituted the Eucharist and instituted the priesthood.
And what's the significance? The
significance becomes then that we should learn about service. All of us, we are called to service, to serve one another. If Christ could come down to stoop to wash the feet of his disciples, he teaches us that we must also serve people. We must be available to offer the same service to people who are around us, no matter who we are. Whether you are a priest, whether you are a politician or doctor or anything, you should be able to have that opportunity to serve the people. It's about service, and leadership is about service. You also have to, put it within the context of leadership. You talk about leadership in terms of service. I call it the Christology of leadership, because Jesus showed us how to be a leader by washing the feet of the disciples, being humane. And then you talk about the institution of the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the summit, the essence of Christian faith. So that day we commemorate the institution of the Holy Eucharist. The Holy Eucharist becomes the body and blood of Christ we receive as Catholics. So we remind ourselves that what we are receiving is not just a wafer, not just a host. We're receiving the body and blood of Christ, because within the context of consecration, the priest prays over bread and wine, and they turn to the body and blood of Christ. Sacramentally, they become, they go beyond what we see. So we talk about the institution of the Eucharist, we talk about the institution of the priesthood. These are what we experience on Holy Thursday, and also gives us the opportunity to also have vigil, to wait for the coming of the Lord, because that day symbolized the day that Jesus was arrested. He was tried in the evening, and then his persecution begins the following day, and all of that. So we talk about the Good Friday, the actual day that Jesus died. And I always tell
so what's
people,
good about it?
yeah, I also tell people that people would have said it should be a bad Friday, it should be a mourning Friday. But then we see that in that particular death, we see resurrection. Every Christian should see the Good Friday as, we should hope for it, because in it we see resurrection. Without the Good Friday, there is no Sunday, there is no Easter Sunday. So Good Friday is very important because we see that God's Son suffered for the sake of humanity. He died. And one of the questions I always ask on Good Friday would be, can God die? Can God actually die? But his death, is a sign that as human beings, we must be ready to face the circumstances and situations that come around us, especially temptations. Like next Sunday, we're going to read about the temptations of Jesus. So on Good Friday, we begin to insert ourselves in the life of Christ, who died for the sake of humanity. And we ask ourselves, how do I die for others? You may not physically kill yourself for other people, but the services you offer to people. And I tell people, there are so many people who offer good services and they do not know that they are participating in the work of Christ. So there are so many people who are also falling in line with what we are talking about. So Good Friday gives us opportunity to see within our own environment what it means for Christ to die for the sake of humanity. And that's the climax, that Jesus died for the sake of humanity, to also lead us to God. And then we talk about Holy Saturday. We expect Jesus lies in the tomb, and we are expecting his resurrection on Easter Sunday. And then we come to Easter Sunday, when Jesus will actually rise from the dead. And I will always tell people, without the Good Friday, there is no Easter Sunday. So in our lives, we must expect such situations in our lives, that sufferings are part of human existence. So we must understand that when sufferings come, like Jesus had his own temptations. When we have our temptations, it's not just, you're not going to say, oh, let me die in this temptation. No, you have been given the opportunity to also overcome these temptations by the power of Jesus, who has given us victory. And St. Paul will say in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10, that I may know Christ and the power of his resurrection. So the power of his resurrection gives us the opportunity to also conquer sin.
Now, what's the takeaway for Christian this period? I've heard someone say, someone that offends him tells someone that offends him, if not
for
that,
Lent.
yes, if not for Lent, I would have dealt with you.
Yeah.
So, is there a takeaway for such Christians that beyond Lent, you can still be the Christian you were during the Lenten period?
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, the Lenten period is not a temporal time to do good. In fact, it should be an opportunity to, remind us of what we are supposed to be, in case we have forgotten. So it's not just to say, okay, I will start doing good, like some people do in New Year resolutions. You procrastinate. Oh, by this I'm going to stop this, stop that. After Lent, you see people on Easter Sunday, some those who have abstained from drinks on Easter Sunday, you see them drinking to stupor. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about keeping off those bad attitudes, never to pick them up again. That's why I said, pick up a virtue, drop a vice. I will always, advocate that we take them one after the other. You don't just come and say, this Lenten period, I will not do this, I will not do that. You have a litany of don'ts within the Lenten period. It doesn't work like that. Measure, target on a particular virtue. Work on it. Work on yourself. You may say, I lie a lot. Let me work on myself. And within these 40 days, if you are consistent, it will become part of you. You will not be able to drop it and then go back to it, go back to the sin again. So it's an opportunity for all of us Christians, not just Catholics, to re-examine ourselves. It's a period of introspection, to ask ourselves, how far have I gone in the exercise of my Christian faith? What am I doing with my life as a Christian? Am I following the line? Am I doing what is expected of me? These are the things we should look at as Christians, and also know that our target is Jesus Christ. All these observances are because we are Christians and we want to be like Christ. So we should not remove our eyes from the goal. The goal is to become like Jesus Christ as Christians. So we should not do things because we want to attract publicity. We should do it because we believe in Jesus Christ and we believe that he will also take care of us.
Now, Jesus Christ, though God was man, the church made us to understand.
Yeah.
He lived, had flesh, had blood like we currently have, and I'm sure people of those days had blood and flesh. But he was exceptional. Then he accepted to give up his life. I don't know if there is a significance, because that is actually, he came, his birth was celebrated. We still celebrate his birth. He lived, he was doing good, performing miracles. People were good with the miracles he was performing. But I'm not sure those people were all around at the time that his persecution started. What can we learn from Jesus Christ, who was a man, even though he is God?
The only thing we can learn is what St. Paul said in Philippians chapter 2 from verse 6 to 10. St. Paul said, even though he was in the form of God, he took the nature of man in all things except in sin. And that's why God gave him glory. God glorified him and gave him a name above every other name, that at the mention of the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow. So there is always that suffering that will lead you to glory. People should not concentrate on the glory. We look at the story. Jesus had a story. And when we talk about the two natures of Jesus, the nature of man and the nature of God, he was fully man and fully God. So within the time he spent on earth, it was humility and self-sacrifice that led him to the cross. I want to make a reference to John chapter 3 verse 16 that people quote often, that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son, And when we quote that, some people don't understand that if you don't have a deeper conversation around it, you will think that God was an exacting God. He put Jesus, go and die for these people. Jesus accepted to die for humanity. He was not coerced into it. He accepted for the love of humanity, for the love of God. He said, okay, I am going to stand in for these people. I'm going to die for them. And he accepted. So in his incarnation, in his birth as man, he through his divinity, he divinized human nature and humanized divinity. It's a theological term. But then it says that Jesus as God came in contact with humanity, sanctified the parts of this humanity, gave man an example to follow in order to reach God. So it was not just a figure that came and died and went away. He sanctified humanity and showed us a good example how we should follow God. And that's what we should look at. The example he left for us. That as God, he was humble. As man, he was humble, even though he was in the same equality with God, St. Paul would say. And yet, he was humble even unto death. So humility, very important. We must learn from Jesus. Humility. Whoever you are, learn how to be, I will say die for other people. But I mean here, you don't just kill yourself. But how to, bring people who are around you to experience God. Through his Paschal mystery. Through his passion and ministry on earth. He led humanity to God. Man lost it when man fell in Genesis chapter 3. But with Jesus, he showed us the way to God. And he galvanized humanity and led all of us. On the cross, he spread his arms and he said, it is finished. He brought humanity together and offered us to God. And this is what we should be appreciative of. But Jesus showed us humility. He showed us the example, and then he led us to God. And that's the climax of what we are celebrating.
And our leaders. Jesus was a leader while he was here. He had men following him. He was their teacher. He was their leader. He was their principal. He was their master. we still have leaders today.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things they should look to when we talk about leadership, given the situation we have found ourselves in?
Yeah,
We have Christian leaders. We have leaders who are Christians.
Yes, many people profess Christianity, but when you give them power, you will see that they are not Christians. And so that's why it's very important that as a Christian in government, in politics, you shouldn't differentiate between politics and your Christian life. You should understand that they must be one. So a Christian should be a Christian at all times and in all circumstances. You cannot say, let us lay aside Christianity and get into politics. Your Christianity should not leave you while you are going into politics. Your Christianity should follow you. It is in politics that you now, unmask or, put out all those dimensions that you have learnt as a Christian. And you help to push Christ into politics. The reason why we're having problems with politicians and leaders today is because they do not understand what we're talking about when we say you are a Christian and you are in politics and you are a leader. The manner of Christ. At a point, when he was teaching and he saw that the people were so hungry and it was so obvious, he saw them and he was saying that they look like sheep without a shepherd. As a leader, you must check the pulse of your people, the people you are leading. And I always say it everywhere, that if you're not a good follower, you can never be a good leader. So Jesus followed the Jewish tradition also. And he made sure that he followed, and then he was able to teach them the proper way. So every leader you have a responsibility. And the responsibility as a Christian who is in government, as a Christian who is in leadership position, is to look up to Jesus and lead people to Jesus. I'm not saying you should come and be preaching, but with your life, you can preach. Evangelism Nunciandi of Paul the VI. Always say in 41, he says that the modern man listens more to witnesses than to preachers. We want leaders who do what they say. Not just leaders in politics, but also religious leaders. We cannot afford to have people who will preach and say things and they do the opposite. So it's also a lesson to all of us. Leadership positions in every strata. We must learn the attitude of Jesus. He combined these things and he was able to lead us to God.
And the followers, like you mentioned, Jesus was a good follower from the biblical account. Yes. He also paid tax.
He paid tax.
Yes.
So as leaders, we have our responsibilities, and as followers, we also have our responsibilities. When a leader and the follower understand their different functions and know that they, have the same goal, that's when we have a sane society. The society is insane today because we have diverse opinions, diverse ideologies about leadership without understanding that we are all, working towards the same goal.
Now, human beings like some sort of motivation and to a large extent reward system. Is there any kind of benefit for anyone who absolutely observes the Lenten season?
Yeah, the only reward you can have is that you will celebrate this Lenten period well, and then you will be closer to Jesus, because the whole essence is to insert yourself in the life of Jesus. Lenten period is a commemoration of the Paschal mystery of Christ. And as Christians, the reward system here is that having spent your Lenten period well, you will also enjoy the benefits when Christ rises from the dead. And his resurrection is our own triumph, is our own glory. If some people will say, if Jesus did not rise from the dead, our hope, our faith would have been in vain. But he rose from the dead. He conquered death. So if I want to actually bring our people to understand that within this period of Lenten period, we should learn the essence of suffering. The Catholic Church is the only church that will teach about suffering. That suffering is part of human existence. That we don't run away from suffering.
What you're saying is actually scary.
Yeah, you can't run away from suffering, because people say you believe in Jesus, therefore everything is okay for you. No, we need to understand it. Even Jesus, as God, suffered. They spat on him. They did all kinds of things. They cajoled him. But he knew that through these things he will triumph. So every Christian should see whatever he's passing through as a stepping stone to glory, to salvation. So the reality of suffering is very clear. You cannot say everything is okay. We are living in the world. We have not exited the world. So we must anticipate these sufferings. Even Jesus, the Bible recorded, he was led into the desert to be tempted by the devil. And he had the power to, restrict himself or to remove himself from any temptation. But he was there because he knew why he came as man, to lead people to God. So as Christians, we must always anticipate that. We must also pray, because his grace is always there for us. Jesus was there, he conquered. Temptation came to him. You can imagine God suffering temptation. So what about human beings? So if we can suffer temptation, and Jesus suffered temptation.
Can you elaborate on the temptation aspect? You have talked about suffering, which is something that is significant to Lenten season. Assuming as a Christian you have forgotten everything about suffering, you will now begin to observe stuff like abstinence. You will avoid some things that that are pleasurable to you, and you will cut down on food, fast for a number of period, or from a certain period to a certain period. Now temptation is also in human nature. It doesn't matter how macho, how hard you are, or how guided you are, it comes. Can you talk about temptation?
Temptation actually is an inevitable part of human existence. I want to say this because Jesus himself allowed himself to be tempted. Satan tempted him 3 times. And
it was about the time he was observing a fast, such as we
so the Lenten period becomes then a period that you experience most temptations. Because as you're trying to be good, as you're trying to do it well, for instance, today that is Ash Wednesday that we do abstinence from meat, for instance, you see somebody who may have forgotten. And it's only when you now have the meat in your mouth that you now say, hey, today is Ash Wednesday. You see, so temptations are bound. And if you say, you cannot say that temptations are evil, that temptation do not come to a Christian. No. How will God know that you believe in him if you don't undergo temptations? It is in temptation that you will show the kind of faith you have. So, not that you should run away from temptations, but when they come, how do you address temptations? Temptations themselves are not evil. What becomes evil is when you succumb to the temptation. For instance, those tempting strategies that the devil came with in the temptation of Jesus, they were so tempting. You can imagine somebody who was fasting for 40 days and 40 nights was actually hungry. Can you make these stones to turn to bread?
And he could actually...
He could have said, okay, turn to bread. Let me show this devil something. But he on each occasion, I want us to be very observant. On each occasion, Jesus would counter the temptation with the word of God. Man does not live by bread alone. And that is it. So each time you find yourself in temptation, especially this period, remember and remind yourself that Jesus also was tempted. He did not succumb. You don't say, this temptation is so great for me, I don't know what to do. But you have the grace. Every Christian, you have the grace. You need to be conscious. That's one of the things we should do in Lent. We need to be conscious of ourselves, conscious of what we do, conscious of the activities we undertake. You have said, okay, I don't want to take too much drink this Lenten period. Why will you go to the places where you drink so much? So you need to also be guided. You need to also, be conscious of what you do and what you say. Satan said, can you throw yourself from this high building? It is written that the angels, that God will send his angels to take care of you, quoting Psalm 91. And
so the devil too quotes the Bible.
Quotes the Bible. So we should be, the life of a Christian is a life that should be guided by the grace of God. God has given us that grace. We just need to respond to the grace. We just need to reciprocate the blessings and favors that God has given to us. We must not leave ourselves like that. The human nature, man, I always say that man is born broken. Man is born broken. So you need the grace of God. You know what happened to Adam and Eve? God gave them the opportunity to be immortal. We must not leave that one aside. Man was created to be
Not
immortal,
to die.
not to die. But because they disobeyed God, Genesis chapter 3 tells us that God gave man punishment. And one of the punishments was that you shall begin to die. You shall go back to dust. That's the dust we are celebrating today. Go back to dust. And from this dust you will come from. Thanks to Jesus Christ who died. Because man would not have appeased God. It took God to appease God. It took Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity, to appease God. And that was why he opened the door of heaven for us to enter. Otherwise, the heavens, the doors of heavens were shut against humanity the day Adam and Eve sinned against God. So he took Jesus Christ, who came and died, and then opened that door for us to go in. So every Christian, I say it again and again, must look up to Jesus as an example. He died for humanity. He suffered for humanity. Humanity should be thankful to Jesus for accepting to come to save humanity. Okay, so
now you mentioned abstinence, and in passing talked about abstinence on meat, for instance. During this Lenten period, are there days that Catholics are expected to abstain from meat?
Ash Wednesday and Good Friday.
Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. The rest of the days they can't.
Yeah, like for instance, in our rectory, for instance, during this period, every Friday we don't take meat.
Okay.
Not that,
but it's not
meat,
obligatory.
Yeah, not on the Christians.
Okay.
Yeah, not that eating meat is evil, but these are also opportunities for us to identify with Jesus in his suffering. Remember that Lenten period is a participation in the passion of Jesus Christ. We are participating in his, he has started his period of fasting in the desert. So we are joining him. We are bringing, that's why I said it is a commemoration. We are bringing in what happened 2,000 years ago to the present, to join Jesus in this suffering. Bearing in mind that we shall rise with him. Having suffered with him, we shall also rise with him.
And that's what happens to Easter. Is that the link?
Yeah, that's the link.
And what we are doing presently will
preparing us to celebrate Easter. And this Lenten period is an opportunity for participating in the sufferings of Jesus, so that we can also participate in his glory.
All right, Padre, before I let you go, I'd like to understand what actually happened, because in the Garden of Eden, sorry, not Garden of Eden, in Gethsemane.
Okay.
Okay. Is it parts of the Lenten activity? What happened? Are you going to make that a part of the sufferings of Jesus Christ, the Gethsemane experience?
Yeah, you know, like I said, beginning the Lenten period becomes an opportunity to participate in the sufferings of Christ. At Gethsemane, Jesus suffered, he was betrayed, he was caught. These are also the dimensions of these sufferings of Christ, which every Christian should also participate in. We should be ready to be betrayed as Christians. Christ was betrayed. In the various circumstances of our lives, we find these betrayals up and down, here and there. So as Christians, what are you going to do to come out of those temptations? So in the Gethsemane period, of course, we have the Gethsemane hour also, that Jesus also died for the sake of humanity. His death is also his death gave us an assurance of heaven. His death gave us an opportunity to recognize that there is resurrection in view. Okay, so inserting ourselves in his sufferings in the Gethsemane period where he suffered, and he had to bleed. He was spat upon, cajoled him, yet he continued. He did not throw in the towel. He continued because there was a target. That target was the salvation of man, and which he joyfully, wrought for our salvation.
All right, thank you very much for being with us, Reverend Father Ambrose Okuchukwu of Ofodile, priest and director, Radio Maria Nigeria, Enugu. And he is the chaplain, I think, of the Holy Rosary College, HRC, right here in Enugu. And our focus was on Lenten period in Christiandom and significances. Lenten, the Christian Church, a period of penitential preparation just before Easter. And what started today will culminate in Easter and will last for 40 days. 40 thank days. You for being with us. And thank you, dear viewer. On that note, we conclude the morning show this morning.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.